Good morning. This is the morning from the New York Times for Wednesday, July 29, 2026. I'm Sam Sifton, and we're starting today not in the Middle East, where missiles are flying and the conflict is escalating sharply, we'll get there, but in Europe, where a continent is burning. The fires threatening central Spain and southwestern France over the past 2 weeks may be small by American standards, where we measure megafires in hundreds of thousands of acres. But in Europe, they are tremendous. Some are the largest in their country's modern histories, raging in places not accustomed to fires of this scale, on the outskirts of Madrid, for instance, or near the ancient vineyards of Bordeaux. Firefighters have been struggling to contain the flames before another heatwave descends on the region today, with temperatures soaring to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Last month was the hottest June on record in Western Europe, and climate experts say the continent can expect even higher temperatures in the future. The heat dries vegetation, making it more susceptible to fire. It also exhausts firefighters. And more destruction may lie ahead. Last year had a record-breaking fire season across Europe, with more than 2.5 million acres burned, about 60% of them in August. The fires of the last 2 weeks have already put 2026 ahead of last year at the same time. Our colleagues Mark Landler and Chico Harlan report from the front lines. In Bordeaux on Sunday, a dense, yellow-orange pall hung over the city, blotting out the sun and blurring the spires of the cathedral. A swirl of tiny ash particles stung eyes and stuck in throats. 20 miles west of town, a mammoth forest fire burned so ferociously that it generated its own weather system. "We've never seen anything like it," said Roger Puron, an 89-year-old retired engineer born before World War II, who was driven out of his home by the advancing flames. The fires have been particularly hard on Madrid, which in recent years has become a booming European capital. Residents can't recall a time when such a large fire advanced so close to the city. Jason Horowitz, our bureau chief there, found Elena Sanchez, 54, pausing from selling beers in a kiosk on the edge of an artificial lake on Madrid's western edge, pointing west toward a sunset that was the wrong color, a hazy gray blush, the fire's smoky residue. As fires raged 30 miles away in recent days, an acrid burning smell imbued the entire park. In a country led by a government that has defined itself by the seriousness with which it takes climate change, the flames have come unsettlingly close to the capital. The fires around Madrid have brought to tears the region's president, Isabel Díaz Ayuso. Experts say they are a harbinger for the damage to come on the world's fastest-warming continent. "These are difficult hours," Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said Monday afternoon during a news conference in Castellón, on Spain's eastern coast, where a new fire raged and forced thousands of new evacuations. "This is a wake-up call," one Madrileno told Jason. Another said that even before the fires, weeks of record-breaking heat had exhausted her. "It just keeps spreading," she said, looking at a sunset ruined by smoke. "Just don't let it reach here." In southwestern France, the fear is palpable in Bordeaux's storied vineyards, home to world-famous appellations like Lafite Rothschild, Pomerol and Essay-Emilion. Mark Landler and Julia Imbert visited one of them this week, a chateau built around a castle that dates to 1365. Draped in vines and flanked by half-timbered towers, the castle at Château Smith-Haute-Lafitte is the kind of legacy that gives its proprietors a sense of permanence. But in the past week, a rampaging forest fire west of Bordeaux, one of the worst since World War II, forcing hundreds of thousands to evacuate, has burned to within 10 miles of the chateau's meticulously tended vineyards. "For the wine industry, it's one thing on top of the other," a director at the chateau told Mark. "There's been drought, heat waves, weak sales because drinking habits are changing, and President Trump's tariffs on French wine. It doesn't make our lives very easy," he continued. "In the face of that risk, we need to be prepared. And so the chateau is readying itself for the once inconceivable possibility that fire could reach its grounds and buildings, with plans to evacuate the chickens, goats, horses, and llamas that live there. The animals are living, breathing beings, unlike the vines," the director said. "The vines are just material." From the smoke of Europe we turn to Washington, where a different kind of era ended yesterday. World leaders and U.S. politicians gathered at the Washington National Cathedral to honor Lindsey Graham, the longtime South Carolina senator who died this month at 71. Peter Baker, our chief White House correspondent, reported from the service. He writes that Graham simply did not fit the cookie-cutter Washington mold. He had little time for staid, heavily edited speeches and all the time in the world for freewheeling Sunday talk shows. He liked to riff. He liked to tease. He liked to surprise and provoke. He could be funny and angry, charming and exasperating, sometimes all at once. President Trump eulogized Graham as one of the great figures in Senate history. Graham, he said, was truly hawkish. He never saw a war that he didn't like. Some of the foreign dignitaries whose wars Graham championed were in attendance, including Benjamin Netanyahu and Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump met separately with both leaders, but he kept the meetings and their details private. Today, a procession and public funeral will be held in South Carolina, followed by a private burial. Peter Baker noted a striking contrast: when the first of the three amigos, John McCain, died, the service felt like a repudiation of President Trump, who was not invited and not welcome. When the last of the amigos departed, the service felt like an affirmation of Mr. Trump, who was not only invited but led the tributes. And now to the war in the Middle East, which is escalating rapidly. The United States and Saudi Arabia said they had carried out joint strikes on Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. The Iranian military said it had targeted American military assets in Jordan. The Houthis claimed an attack on another Saudi tanker, escalating its declared blockade of the Red Sea. With their ally Iran bottling up the Strait of Hormuz, the Houthi group in Yemen is escalating its declared blockade of Saudi shipping in another vital waterway. The Iranian-backed Houthi militant group said on Tuesday that it had targeted a Saudi oil tanker with missiles in what would be the latest attack in an emerging front of the war between the United States and Iran. The skirmishes between the Houthis, who control a large part of Yemen, and the Saudis risked igniting another conflict and infused more volatility into world energy supplies. Saudi authorities did not immediately confirm the attack on the latest tanker, the NCC Ghazal. Meanwhile, Iran publicly hanged two protesters who participated in the country's widespread January demonstrations, human rights groups said. The hangings were carried out at dawn in Isfahan's Shahid Ali Square, according to the Washington-based human rights activists' news agency, and appeared to draw a rare public backlash. Several videos verified by the New York Times show large crowds of chanting protesters near the site. Human rights activists say the Iranian government has been rapidly escalating executions, part of what they describe as a rapid increase in the government's use of the death penalty this year. Closer to home, a new front in the immigration crackdown. Our colleagues Hamed Al-Aziz and Miriam Jordan have a Times exclusive. ICE has started arresting foreign citizens with expired visas, including spouses of Americans, as they travel through airports. The Trump administration has begun arresting foreign citizens with expired U.S. visas as they travel through airports, including spouses of Americans, according to documents obtained by the New York Times and interviews with immigration lawyers, a tactic that opens up a vast new pool of people for deportation. Immigration agents in plainclothes have whisked away targets at check-in counters and arrival gates, with enforcement actions in at least 15 airports in recent weeks. Some of the arrests have occurred quietly, while others have unfolded in full view of other travelers. Many of those detained have active applications to stay in the country, including tech workers and spouses of U.S. citizens. And at the border, a case that sounds like spycraft but isn't. Federal prosecutors in Atlanta are bringing an obstruction charge against a U.S. citizen who gave customs officers what is known as a duress passcode, which activated software that erased the contents of his phone. Samuel Tunick, an Atlanta resident, was stopped for interrogation at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport as he returned to the United States on January 2. He gave officers a passcode that triggered a feature on his phone, an open-source operating system that can be downloaded onto Android phones, designed to wipe the device's data. Now he faces a felony charge. It sounds like something James Bond would use, a gadget that self-destructs if it falls into the wrong hands. But it's actually technology available to anyone. In politics, a sordid family drama involving two powerful Republican members of Congress from Ohio is threatening to put a fairly safe GOP House seat at risk. Representative Max Miller, a second-term Republican representing Northeast Ohio whose political rise was fueled by his close relationship to President Trump, has been accused by his ex-wife, Emily Moreno, daughter of Senator Bernie Moreno, of scalding her, holding a gun to her head and fracturing their toddler's collarbone. Miller has denied the accusations. Annie Carney and Robert Draper report that this years-long feud might put his otherwise safe seat in play in an already challenging midterm election year for the party. The Senate confirmed Jay Clayton as the Director of National Intelligence. Meanwhile, Kentucky's Governor, Andy Beshear, called on Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who has been hospitalized since June, to prove his capacity to serve, or to resign. More than 6 weeks after the former Republican leader entered the hospital and vanished from public life, the state's ambitious Democratic governor sent him a letter. I am addressing this letter to Senator McConnell under the assumption that he is capable of reading and responding verbally, and not incapacitated by means of consciousness or cognition, the governor began. He went on to call on Mr. McConnell to directly and verbally address the people of Kentucky and provide proof of your capacity to serve. The Democratic Party approved a new primary calendar for 2028. South Carolina will vote first. Instead of Iowa and New Hampshire, long the traditional openers, Democratic candidates will navigate a six-state gauntlet that starts in South Carolina on January 22, wins through Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico and Michigan, and ends in Virginia on February 29. Lisa Lara reports that the cross-country sprint has significantly broadened the electorate that will have early say in the nomination, giving Black and Latino voters new clout, though no one is quite sure what turns the widely expected crowded and competitive contest will take. Around the world, a powerful earthquake hit southwest Japan yesterday, igniting fires and damaging buildings and highways. At least 13 people have died. Rescue personnel are working to free those trapped in collapsed buildings after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck Kumamoto on Tuesday. As more than 200 aftershocks continue to jolt Kyushu, Japan's southernmost main island, rescue teams work to find people trapped inside partially collapsed structures, including a shopping mall and a paper factory. Fire response teams and the police joined 4,600 military personnel in the rescue efforts. Japan is racing against time to reach people trapped in the rubble. 6 months into the Trump administration's oil blockade of Cuba, there are widespread blackouts. At night, Cubans struggle to sleep without electricity for fans, so they gather in the dark. Jack Nikas explains in a video report how the energy crisis has deepened, with the island's aging infrastructure unable to cope with the loss of subsidized Venezuelan oil and the tightening of U.S. sanctions. In health news, Anthony Fauci's diaries reveal an obsession with his own celebrity, even during a deadly pandemic. The New England Journal of Medicine. This was not. When Dr. Anthony S. Fauci's pandemic diary was made public over the weekend by his Republican nemesis, it provided a rare, unfiltered look at the private thoughts of one of the most polarizing public officials in America as he led the nation through crisis. A typical entry, dated May 21, 2020, begins by noting the global death toll from the pandemic, 234,100, and continues, typos intact, big front page article about me appeared in the Washington Post. Very flattering. The situation with my national and international fame is explosive and real. Sean McCreish reports that the diary entries paint a portrait of a man deeply preoccupied with his media image, his fame, and his place in history, even as the death toll mounted. Dozens of states have tried to dismantle vaccine rules and undermine public trust in vaccines this year, introducing more than 200 bills for the purpose, a Times analysis found. The legislative push reflects a broader shift in the politics of public health, with vaccine skepticism moving from the fringes to the center of Republican policymaking in many state capitals. The cyclosporiasis outbreak has sickened more than 11,000 Americans so far. Health officials insist the country's food supply is safe. Donald Prater, the acting deputy commissioner for food at the FDA, told attendees at the annual meeting of the International Association for Food Protection, the U.S. food supply is safe. However, there's a couple of challenges, he said, referring to the cyclosporiasis outbreaks. It will take a little time. Julie Cresswell reports from New Orleans that even as cases hit record levels, top regulators are urging calm. But conspiracy theories about the Trump administration's role in the outbreak are spreading on social media. On sites like X and TikTok, the conversation about Taylor Farms is dominated by conjecture about the produce firm's donation to a Trump-linked PAC. In technology, Mark Zuckerberg took aim at Anthropic and OpenAI in an interview with The Times, saying they have pushed to tightly control AI development. Meta's chief executive came out swinging against two of the world's most valuable artificial intelligence startups, saying the way they developed AI software could lead to a centralization of power that would narrow people's access to the transformational technology. In an interview on Tuesday, the 42-year-old CEO did not call out Anthropic and OpenAI by name, but he said that if leading research labs wanted to develop AI technology in a tightly controlled way, that's not the future that I want to build. He said he supported more openness. Mike Isaac and Eli Tan report from San Francisco that Zuckerberg's comments reflect a deepening divide in Silicon Valley over whether AI should be developed behind closed doors by a few powerful companies or released openly for researchers and developers worldwide. Florida executed 2 men convicted of murder yesterday, both by lethal injection. It was the first time in decades the state executed 2 people in one day. Florida has been carrying out executions at a record pace, the Times magazine recently reported. Both men had been convicted of murder in the 1980s. One had maintained his innocence, while the other became the second octogenarian to be put to death in the U.S. in the last 50 years. James Duckett, 68, a former police officer convicted of sexually assaulting and strangling an 11-year-old girl, was pronounced dead at 1:19 p.m. Dominic Akikon Jr., 80, followed hours later. Nicholas Bogle-Burrows reports that the executions are part of a dramatic rise in capital punishments during Governor Ron DeSantis' second term. In Opinion Today, David Wallace Wells and Rachel Bedard debate the drive to optimize personal health. Americans have spent billions of dollars tracking themselves, their steps, their blood oxygen saturation, their sleep cycles, their glucose levels. Is any of this data making us healthier? They explore what tracking ourselves versus the population at large can teach us and our doctors, and whether artificial intelligence might one day make sense of all of this data. Meanwhile, Madeleine Schwartz writes that more air conditioning can't save France from dangerously hot summers, but real government policy could. As the fires rage near Bordeaux, her argument resonates: adaptation requires more than individual cooling units, it demands systemic change in urban planning, labor protections, and healthcare infrastructure. In Morning Reads, we've made these links free for you. Scientists in Costa Rica are using AI to test the cognitive abilities of monkeys in the wild. The Capuchinos de Toboga project has deployed Capuchin AI, a portable testing station equipped with a touchscreen and facial recognition software, deep in the Toboga Forest Reserve. One day last summer, a curious white-faced capuchin encountered a strange contraption in the forest, a 15-inch touchscreen mounted in a wooden frame. As the monkey, an alpha male named Poppy, began investigating, poking the device here, prodding it there, his fingers landed on the screen. Suddenly, a piece of dried banana dropped into a tray below the frame. Before long, Poppy learned the basic rules: touch the screen, get a dried banana slice. He also provided proof of concept for Capuchin AI, which could help scientists study primate intelligence in the wild without bringing animals into a lab. Emily Andas reports that this approach could revolutionize how we understand animal cognition. Scientists in Mexico used an underwater ultrasound to confirm pregnancies in giant rays. Giant manta rays are otherworldly leviathans gliding through the world's seas on massive wings. But even though they are the largest ray species in the world, a fundamental part of their lives remains obscure: where they give birth. The big unknown for us now is where females go to pup and where these pups hang out, said Joshua Stewart, a marine ecologist at Oregon State University. Now, a team of scientists in Mexico has reported the first use of underwater ultrasound scans to detect pregnancies in these animals, a strategy that may help answer that question. Alexa Robles-Gill reports that they managed to confirm pregnancies in 3 giant mantas, offering clues to the animal's elusive reproductive habits. Your pick. The most clicked link in the morning yesterday was about a man who finished a 10-mile hike after impaling himself on a trekking pole. A remarkable story of survival. Today's number, 60,000. That is how many Italian honeybees live and work in hives on the roof of the Times' headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. Megan McRae visited the hives with the beekeepers who take care of them. It was a hot, sticky Thursday in June, and New York City was buzzing from the energy of a wildly improbable Knicks comeback in the NBA Finals. 7 blocks from Madison Square Garden, on a rooftop above the 4th floor of the New York Times building, a group of small, improbable residents were also abuzz, some 60,000 Italian honeybees. High above Midtown Manhattan, they forage in nearby parks and gardens, producing honey that's harvested and shared with Times staff. In sports, FIFA announced plans to sell a stake in a new company that will run its premier events. Soccer's governing body plans to sell a large minority stake in a new entity called FIFA Forward Enterprises, which will take over all commercial operations including the World Cup and Club World Cup, as part of a plan to triple the amount of development money it dishes out to its 211 member associations. A member of Trump's extended family is expected to be involved through the lead investment firm. Under the proposals, subject to approval by a majority of national associations in FIFA's 37-member council, FIFA remains the game's global governing body and retains a majority stake in the new company. In women's soccer, Malawi stunned Nigeria, the 10-time reigning champion, 3-2 in their first-ever Women's Africa Cup of Nations game. Temwa Chawinga scored 2 goals for Malawi, and the Chawinga sisters combined for a trio of goals in one of the biggest upsets so far in the top African women's soccer competition. The WAFCON debutantes stormed the pitch when the game ended in Morocco. The competition includes qualification for the 2027 World Cup with the tournament's best 4 teams. Recipe of the day: Klodnik Latuski, a Polish chilled beet and potato soup of extreme excellence. Here's the plan: make it, get it into the fridge to cure so that its flavors marry and its color deepens. You'll eat it tomorrow for dinner. While the beets are roasting and you're cooking the potatoes, order a pizza. That's dinner tonight. David Milosh photographed it for The Times. Simon Andrews styled the food. Saying goodbye, 8 seasons after its debut on Showtime, Lena Waithe's crime and trauma series The Chi, the longest-running black drama on cable television, wrapped up last week. Waithe sat down with The Times' Salami Shatila to talk about the show's evolution, the pressures she faced and what she was trying to achieve. There was this desire to compare it to The Wire, Waithe said. There's no greater compliment, but I'm not that interested in the system. I'm more interested in the people that have to deal with the system and what kind of impact it has on their lives. From its beginning in 2018, The Chi sought to defy expectations about criminality in Chicago and focus on the kinds of families that are rarely seen in a TV drama. As James Poniwazik wrote in his review of its first season, while it unfolds from a crime, it's not really a crime story. It's about a widening pool of people who would, well, you'll have to read the conversation. More on culture. Marlon James's The Disappearers, a novel about a hate crime in 1980s Jamaica, was nominated yesterday for the Booker Prize, alongside a dozen other books, including Douglas Stewart's John of John and The Things We Never Say by Elizabeth Strout. The Booker, a distinguished British literary award, is given out each year. James's novel is his first non-fantasy work since he won the 2015 Booker Prize for A Brief History of Seven Killings, and it's already one of the year's most anticipated literary releases. Emily Wilson, whose translation of Homer's Odyssey was a touchstone for Christopher Nolan as he adapted the story for the screen, absolutely roasted the movie in the London Review of Books. I would be ashamed to have written any part of this script, she writes. Whatever you think of the film, it's fun to read. The Morning recommends, take the stairs and follow 8 other tips experts say will increase your longevity. How you treat your body and brain in your midlife years, loosely defined as 40 to 60, can hugely influence how you age in the decades to come. The seeds for many age-related diseases, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer and dementia, are sown in middle age. Midlife is the ideal time to make changes, not only to benefit you in the present, but also in the future, said Margie Lockman, a psychology professor at Brandeis University. Stop exchanging your grill's empty propane tank for a full one. Have it refilled instead. You'll get more fuel for less money. There is no link, this is my learned experience. Replace your dishwasher detergent with one of the ones Wirecutter recommends. I'm sure you like yours. But it's doubtful you've done as those scullions have, and tested over 30 different varieties. Games, here is today's spelling bee. Yesterday's pangrams were impending, and impinged. And here are today's mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your morning with The Times and me. If you don't already, would you consider subscribing? Subscriptions make our work possible and allow it to continue. See you tomorrow. Sam.